Committee, for the record, my name is Ben Adams, Senator from District 12.
And raised in the Soviet Union as a
pleasure of bringing
kid.
before you Senate Bill 1077, the Idaho Crisis Pregnancy Center Grant Program. Now, this is a timely piece of legislation in a post-Roe reality. Crisis pregnancy centers in the state of Idaho, fill a critical void in the state of Idaho for expectant mothers, especially in low-income and vulnerable communities. Excuse me. The state of Idaho has taken, on behalf of the citizens of Idaho, a strong pro-life position that all of us, I believe, almost all of us on this committee have been here for. And this legislation affirms that position and allows us to take additional steps to support expectant mothers. It also allows for potential federal funds that get sent to Idaho to have somewhere to go to support pro-life. I'm going to just walk through this legislation with you before I stand for questions so we know exactly what it does and doesn't do. So on page 1 is definitions. Page 2, the goal of this is to improve access for pregnancy-related counseling and other services. The scope of the grant is it'll be issued proportionate to the number of clients served by that applicant in the previous year. And this grant will be overseen by the director of the Department of Health and Welfare. If there's a crisis pregnancy center that has not been in operation for a year and they don't have that data to show, they can apply for a $25,000 grant to help with their expenses in their grant program. Let's see. On page 3, you'll find the fraudulent information on grant applications. This allows, if there is any fraud, for it to be clawed back by the Department of Health and Welfare. The last thing that this bill really does is it adds to the Defense of Life Act that in the rare case of rape or incest, that the physician that's going to perform that abortion is still required to provide the informed consent materials to those women 24 hours prior to conducting the abortion, which is consistent with the state of Idaho's policy on abortion. Mr. President, wow, I'm used to talking on the floor. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for any questions and look forward to them.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Adams, are the pregnancy centers in Idaho, are they asking for this money? Are they needing this money to continue to operate this grant money here?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Shippey, they're not asking for the money, but whether they need the money is actually a very good question. Since Roe v. Wade went away and DOLA was implemented, they have seen their numbers increase significantly, the demand for their services. And so this would be very beneficial to them and would be a positive on the state and for the pro-life movement at large.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. Senator Adams, later on in the bill where it amends the Defense of Life Act, amends the section on the rape exception, could you, tell us how many rape case abortions every year in Idaho this would affect?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Shippey, however many there were, and however many there would be in the future. Again, this is just reinforcing the state's position and assuring that informed consent is adhered to.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you. Follow up. Specifically, how many since Roe versus Wade has been overturned, how many of these cases would have it affected in Idaho?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Shippey, I don't think there have been any reported cases of rape or incest, which is a credit to the character of the people of Idaho more than anything else. But it does not change the fact that the informed consent laws have already been in place in the past, and this is just making sure that they apply to the Defense of Life Act as well.
Senator Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Adams. I'm just looking at the lines 45, 48, page 3. And just so I'm clear, I'm just wondering, so if a woman or a mother goes in and she needs an abortion because it's an emergency, it's to save her life, does she have to wait 24 hours, get a pamphlet, and does she have to wait that time when it's a critical moment?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Harris, thank you for that question. No, she would not. The section that deals with the life of the mother is section A, starting at line 27 and going down to line 43. Everything line 44 down and on page 3 is in relation to rape or incest, not the life of the mother.
Okay, thank you.
Don't see any other questions. We do have several people signed up to testify, so we'll try to move through these. Mary Ruck. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair Guthrie and committee members. My name is Mary Ruck. I live in the Treasure Valley, and I am speaking for myself against SB 1077. I just have a few questions. Why not just let the already existing private organizations, those crisis pregnancy centers, just carry on as they have, rather than spend taxpayer money on private entities? Why should Idaho taxpayers, support these private religious entities? 2, who is monitoring these organizations that are providing these services to pregnant women and girls? How are you evaluating the effectiveness of the services and providing public accountability of the annual payout of more than $1 million taxpayer dollars? Is it constitutional to give tax dollars to religious organizations such as Christian-based crisis pregnancy centers? Is it ordinary that organizations granted taxpayer money be treated differently than non-religious organizations, such that the supervising department of the state shall not interfere with the internal operations or policies of the recipient crisis pregnancy center, and the state's supervising department in this bill must minimize the administrative burden on crisis pregnancy centers to that which is necessary to provide for public accountability of grant awards? What makes these organizations eligible for such special treatment? Lastly, why is the addition of that last section of 18.622 subsection 2B in this bill? It has nothing to do with providing grants to a select type of crisis pregnancy center. This bill is a bad idea. What other private organizations will Idaho taxpayers be expected to support? Please vote no on this bill.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you for being here. We'll try to go to Kathy Dawes virtually. Good morning.
There we go.
Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, introduce yourself for the record, who you represent, and the time's yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Guthrie and committee. I'm Kathy Dawes from Latah County, speaking in strong opposition to Bill 1077. Crisis pregnancy centers, CPCs, do not have to provide licensed medical providers. They're unregulated, not bound by HIPAA privacy rules, not required to provide factual, unbiased medical information to patients, and have little, if any, oversight. According to a June 22 National Institutes of Health report, quote, These facilities engage in purposefully manipulative and deceptive practices that spread misinformation on sexual health and abortion. CPCs have also been shown to delay access to medically legitimate prenatal and abortion care, which negatively impacts maternal health. In December 24, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists made a list of all the known misleading practices of these centers. It underscored the fact that CPCs are often non-medical facilities with no legal obligation to provide pregnant women with accurate scientific information and are not subject to relevant regulations. They strongly recommended that government funding only go to legitimate healthcare organizations that provide comprehensive, medically accurate, and non-directive counseling and referrals. Providing over $1 million of taxpayer funds for grants to these unregulated organizations is irresponsible. The bill's statement of purpose says, quote, "The state of Idaho is prohibited from interfering with the internal policies and missions of pregnancy centers as a condition of the grants, as most pregnancy centers in Idaho are faith-based," unquote. This means that public funds will be used for religious purposes, clearly in violation of Idaho's Constitution. Please vote no on S 1077. Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Going to try Joyce Day virtually. Good morning. Can you hear us?
Oh, yes.
Introduce yourself for the record, who you represent. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'm Joyce Day. I am the Executive Director of Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center in Pocatello, Idaho. We are a nonprofit community resource and a ministry that offers free pregnancy tests, information, education, and support for women and men in our community who face pregnancy decisions, abortion, adoption, and parenting. We have a program called Life Steps, which provides individualized mentoring and material services to our clients, such as maternal and infant items like diapers, wipes, clothes, blankets, car seats, pack and plays, and much more, all of which is donated or purchased with donated funds and provided at no cost to our clients. Our education topics range from sexual health and relationships, exploring pregnancy options, including parenting, adoption, and abortion, pregnancy, labor and delivery and breastfeeding, fatherhood, healing from trauma, abuse, and past abortions, life skills, Bible studies, and much more. I'm here to offer my support of the Senate Bill 1077 because we strongly believe women need to be fully informed before making a pregnancy decision that they can live with long term, and they need time to do this, even under difficult circumstances such as rape or incest. I support the Idaho Crisis Pregnancy Center program because as a small organization with the current budget of only $148,000, we are keenly aware of the cost to expand our services. I recently heard the phrase, "A resource unknown is not actually a resource at all," and it really impressed upon me the need to increase awareness of organizations like ours throughout our community and our state. This grant proposal is very timely and needed. For example, the minimum grant amount of $25,000 would not only allow us to market our services more specifically to those who need them, but also provide funds to hire a staff member who could specifically direct and expand center programs. We are also outgrowing our current facility as we are seeing an increase in clients, causing a need to increase our team of volunteers and staff. So growing pains, they're welcomed, but are still painful as we navigate balancing our budget and expanding our services. This grant would ease those growing pains while allowing us to serve more women, men, and families with excellence. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for joining us. Senator Ruckey has a question.
Mr. Chairman, not a question. I just wanted to say hi to Joyce. She
Yes.
taught my son choir at Century High School. She worked for our office for a little while. We just really enjoyed having her. She's a great person. Took me on a tour of her facility, so I just wanted to say hi to Joyce.
Yes, I wanted to say hi to you too.
Thank you for joining us. Martha Lund. Welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and committee members.
You pull that mic up just a tad. There you go.
My name is Dr. Martha Lund. I'm a retired OBGYN physician. I am testifying on behalf of AAUW, which is an organization that advocates for women and girls. I'm testifying against SB 1077. I gave everybody a handout. It's the issue paper from American College of OBGYN, which I'm a member of, on CPCs. Crisis Pregnancy Centers, or CPCs, are non-regulated facilities that represent themselves as legitimate reproductive health care clinics, but actually are mostly staffed by non-medical people who are not subject to HIPAA laws or healthcare regulations, and whose main goal is to prevent abortions, not to provide medical care. They advertise online using keywords that are deceptive, such as pregnancy emergency care, to attract women. Then they use misleading propaganda when women come in for care. These facilities use false information, emotional manipulation using ultrasound and other means, and delays to divert pregnant patients from accessing timely medical care from licensed medical providers. Despite the wording of this resolution, CPCs actually prevent early and adequate pregnancy care. Pregnant people seeking confirmation of pregnancy, answers to questions, and decision-making support may unwittingly seek care at a CPC. This can delay their ability to seek non-judgmental, compassionate, respectful care from an actual healthcare professional. Supplying these facilities with hard-earned taxpayer dollars is an insult to the women in Idaho and to the hardworking actual women's healthcare providers who work hard every day to keep Idaho's women healthy. Thank you for your time. I will stand for questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
William Mitchell.
No questions of an OBGYN, eh?
Welcome to committee.
20%
Just
have left
introduce
Idaho.
yourself and who you represent.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is William Mitchell, and I represent Legal Voice. I'm in District 12 in Nampa in the sponsors jury district. I'm speaking today in opposition to Senate Bill 1077, and I wanted to bring two issues to the committee's attention. One has already been addressed so fully, I'll just glance over most of that. It has to do with that 7-figure annual fiscal note. And I just wanted to mention that the bill is meant to benefit religious charities that are doing just fine without that handout. And there's a good reason why the Idaho Freedom Foundation has given the bill a -2 score. It's for that reason. But the second issue, which may not be so obvious to everybody here on the committee, but since the bill has come back up for testimony, I need to share that information in this setting and on the record. Our organization, working with two partner organizations with national reach, asked the attorneys general in Idaho, Louisiana, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Washington last April to investigate the practices of unregulated crisis pregnancy centers using the statutory processes of each state's Consumer Protection Act. I recently submitted a public records request to our attorney general on this subject, and I do have some materials returned, but Mr. Labrador's investigation into the deceptive trade practices of unregulated crisis pregnancy centers is not returned yet. Regardless, the biggest unregulated crisis pregnancy center affiliate in the country, which is called Heartbeat International, recently conceded that CPCs are not covered by the crucial federal patient privacy statute known as HIPAA because they're not medical clinics known as covered entities under that law. They look and act like bona fide medical facilities, but very respectfully, they're just not. And this misunderstanding harms pregnant people in Idaho in ways that others have already mentioned. So that's just not how Idaho should spend taxpayer dollars. As if $1 million annual fiscal note wasn't enough to give you pause, now you know these operations are not regulated by the most basic of patient protections like HIPAA. So please don't give them that gratuitous handout. Be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Ruckey has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mitchell. Are you aware of any other charitable organizations in Idaho that receive grant funding of the magnitude contemplated by this bill?
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckey, I do think that Idaho provides grant funding to other charitable organizations, but the distinct difference in this case is that crisis pregnancy centers are religiously affiliated, and I think if we consider carefully the strictures of the Blaine Amendment, which prohibits grant funding to religious institutions, I think we encounter a problem there. The issue with the Blaine Amendment, of course, is that you can give grant funding to religiously affiliated healthcare facilities, but in this case, even CPCs admit they're not healthcare facilities, as that term is defined under important federal laws like HIPAA.
Senator Ruckte.
A separate question, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mitchell, you mentioned Consumer Protection Act investigation. What were your main concerns that you raised in the complaint?
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckte, the Consumer Protection Act in Idaho is an interesting statute because it is a way to protect against fraudulent or deceptive trade practices that may impact Idaho consumers. This may have been an investigation we would have preferred to pursue through the Board of Medicine or through Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. But again, crisis pregnancy centers just don't qualify as medical or healthcare facilities under that definition in code. So we had to revert to the the Consumer Protection Act in order to do that investigation. And I actually brought a copy of our complaint to the Attorney General if the committee would like that and add that to the record.
You're welcome. As you exit, you're welcome to give that to the page.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't see any other questions.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
thank
Chair.
you for being with us
Thank you
this
so
morning.
much.
Let's go with David Ripley. Welcome to committee. Just introduce yourself and who you represent. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm David Ripley, Executive Director of Idaho Chooses Life, and we want to commend Senator Adams for bringing forth this legislation. Idaho has the best pro-life law in the country. Nevertheless, babies are still at risk in the state. We have, of course, the lure of going across borders to obtain abortions that would be illegal in the state. And because of the Biden administration, we also have mail-in abortions, webcam abortions, and illegal prescription drugs being shipped into Idaho. So babies are very much at risk in the state of Idaho. And the pregnancy centers, there are approximately 18 of them all across the state, serve as the backstop to help rebuild a culture of life in the state of Idaho. The fact of the matter is that they are some of the best people that you'll ever know in terms of their compassion, their ability to reach out and to love women and girls in crisis. I strongly support this legislation because we must step up our efforts to support women and girls in crisis who would otherwise seek an abortion. Those pregnancy centers provide the backstop and the support necessary for them to choose life and to rebuild the culture of life in the state of Idaho. And I would just like to point out just quickly the reference in the language at the back of the bill related to DOLA and the informed consent materials. This is actually not a change in the law whatsoever. It is a clarification of existing law. The informed consent statute has been in place in the state of Idaho since the 90s. And the fact is that what we are doing with this legislation is clarifying that in these rare cases, that those women are entitled to get that information on the options available to them and to have 24 hours at least to think about what their options might be in the hopes of saving those babies at risk. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the time you've given us today.
Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Don't see any questions. Thank you for being with us this morning. Let's go with Kelly O'Neill. Welcome to committee.
Oh, good morning.
Just introduce yourself and who you represent.
Chairman Guthrie and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak today. My name is Kelly O'Neill. I live in District 18, and I'm here to express concerns about Senate Bill 1077 as an Idaho taxpayer. Idaho has long stood for limited government, fiscal restraint, and accountability. This bill creates a new taxpayer-funded grant program, expanding government into an area where private charities and nonprofits have traditionally and successfully stepped up to serve our community. Adding a state-run grant program risks long-term budget creep, increasing dependency for services that should remain within the private sector. Patrick Henry once told us he knows of no other way of judging the future than by the past. And as history has shown us, that once a new government program is established, it rarely shrinks. Additionally, this bill lacks strong oversight. Grant funding is awarded based on self-reported numbers from applicants without any clear standards to ensure funds are used efficiently. This creates a risk of fraud, waste, and mismanagement of our resources, leaving Idaho taxpayers to foot the bill. We, as Idahoans, expect accountability and transparency when our hard-earned tax dollars are spent, and unfortunately, this bill does not do that. Ronald Reagan once said, "Wouldn't it be better for the human spirit and for the soul of this nation to encourage people to accept more responsibility to care for each other rather than leaving those tasks to paid bureaucrats?" Rather than taking money from the people through taxes and redistributing it to charity, perhaps the government should reduce taxes so that we as Idahoans have more money to donate voluntarily to charities we believe in. I urge this committee to reconsider the long-term fiscal impact of this bill, as it does not hold true to Idaho's values of self-reliance, limited government, and strong local communities who care for one another. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Appreciate you being here. We'll try John Crowder virtually.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can't see you. Maybe your camera's off, but either way, just introduce yourself and who you represent for the record, and the time's yours.
Thank you very much. My name is John Crowder. I reside in Pocatello, Idaho, and I'm speaking for myself. I am opposed to S-1077. I'm a former county commissioner, current GOP legislative district chairman, and most relevant, a past board chairman for a pro-life pregnancy center in Idaho. As a Christian who believes that life begins at conception, I am emphatically pro-life. I believe that those who drafted this legislation had good intentions. Nevertheless, I must oppose it for the following reasons. First, using taxpayer dollars to subsidize nonprofit entities is not the proper role of government. I would not be happy if my taxpayer dollars were being given to an organization supporting abortions. Many on the opposite side of this issue believe just as fervently that they are in the right. Providing taxpayer funds to organizations on either side of this moral question is inappropriate. Such decisions to lend financial support should be left to churches and individuals, not the government. Second, pregnancy centers do not need government funds to accomplish their mission, nor is it appropriate for them to accept such funds. During my tenure as the board chairman of a pro-life pregnancy center, being privy to our financial records, it was clear that we had no difficulty in raising the funds necessary to fulfill our mission without government handouts. Third, having government step in and take on roles that are the purview of church, family, and the individual inevitably leads to the decline in those entities fulfilling their proper roles in society, as people increasingly look to the government to relegate every aspect of their lives. Another service organization of which I was a part recently closed their doors for this very reason, that government had usurped their role in society, which ultimately eliminated the reason for being. For these reasons, I urge a no vote on S 1077.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Commissioner. I don't see any questions. Next, let's go with Janelle Faulkner virtually.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, just introduce yourself and who you represent for the record. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Janelle Faulkner, and I am the Executive Director of the newly established pregnancy center in Idaho Falls, Idaho, Nest Pregnancy Care Center. I strongly support SB 1077 because as a newer center, many women in crisis simply don't know we exist. This grant would be life-changing, allowing us to reach women at the moment they need us most. When a woman discovers she has an unplanned pregnancy, she feels alone and afraid. She immediately turns to the internet, searching for answers and solutions. She finds a lot of information on there, and she doesn't know how to weed through it. But what she can do is discover us, Nest Pregnancy Care Center, as a place for her to unpack her emotions and process through her options. We provide medically accurate information, and we now offer free limited obstetrical ultrasounds, and we have one-on-one counseling, giving women a safe place to process their emotions and understand all of their options. But if we can't reach them in time, they may never know that this support is available. Women are finding the abortion pill online and taking them without even knowing if they are eligible. 1 in 4 pregnancy naturally ends in miscarriage, and the abortion pill is only approved up to 10 weeks. Yet many women don't know how far along they are, and they are taking the abortion pill where it is not approved. We can provide that crucial medical confirmation, giving them the full picture before they make an irreversible choice. Please pass SB 1077 so we can stand in the gap for these women, providing medically accurate information, and help us give these women resources and a safe place to unpack their emotions and make a decision that they can live with long term.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Misty Tolman, we'll try her virtually. Good morning.
Morning, can you hear me?
Yeah, just introduce yourself and who you represent. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Misty Delicarpini Tolman, and I'm here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Alliance advocates in strong opposition to SB 1077. This bill is a misuse of taxpayer dollars that funnels money into crisis pregnancy centers with no oversight, no accountability, and no requirement that they meet medical standards of legitimate clinics. These centers are not bound by HIPAA or patient privacy laws, and many don't even have licensed medical providers on staff. Yet this bill would hand them public funds with no strings attached. Even more concerning is the provision tacked on at the end of SB 1077 that amends our state's near total abortion ban and making it harder for victims of rape and incest to access abortion. Already under state law, a victim must report the crime to law enforcement and provide a copy of the report to the physician in order to access an abortion in the first trimester of pregnancy only. This is already a nearly insurmountable and intimidating barrier, since many victims do not report sexual assault to law enforcement for fear of harassment and stigma, and may not be able to access care in this short of time frame. Now the bill adds yet another barrier, forcing survivors to complete informed consent paperwork at least 24 hours in advance in order to access this exemption. This additional provision does nothing to help victims who have already been through so much trauma or meaningfully ensure that they can access the care they legally have the right to. Regarding a previous testifier, yes, this provision has been in place in Idaho for some time, but as stated by the bill sponsor, we are in a post-Roe era. one where victims who have been traumatized would now have to navigate even more red tape to access needed health care. Idaho should be investing in helping victims, not mandating further restrictions that make it even harder to access health care. We urge you to reject SB 1077.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you for joining us. That's the end of our ones that we had signed up. Is there anyone that tried to sign up but was unsuccessful? Not seeing anyone. Would you like to testify? Oh. It always helps when we have them signed up in the queue, but let's get through a few of them if we can. Scott Watson.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. The first duty of government is to protect the life and liberty of all innocent humans. Plundering the people to fund pregnancy centers is not a proper role of government. In our Declaration of Independence, there is a self-evident truth that all men have been endowed by their Creator with an equal right to life. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states that no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law. Establishing in code special murder rights is not due process. Page 4, line 26, retains immunity for mothers who killed their preborn children. No. The moral law says to love God and our neighbor. I find this piece of proposed legislation S 1077 to be fatally flawed. It is unjust in several ways, including an added allowance for premeditated murder to be done in the name of informed consent. By holding elected office, you have been given a personal responsibility to protect the self-evident truth of the God-given right to life. Scripture says, to whom much is given, much shall be required. Since God hates the hands that shed innocent blood, I ask you to purpose in your hearts to love and fear God and to do what is required of civil magistrates. Do justice and only justice.
Thank you. Sophia Grigg. Just introduce yourself and who you represent.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sophia Grigg, and I represent myself. I am a Christian and an abolitionist, and I am testifying against Senate Bill number 1077 out of obedience to God and out of love for both my preborn neighbors and my plundered neighbors. Regarding my plundered neighbors, I want to expose the idea of the state government funding crisis pregnancy centers for what it truly is: socialism. Of course, the government has no legitimate role in coercively redistributing resources to private entities. Instead, the true role of government is to ensure that justice is equally applied under the law. In Deuteronomy 16, verse 20, it says, "Justice and only justice you shall pursue." Instead of providing equal justice for the preborn, S 1077 retains that mothers have legal immunity to murder their preborn children. Instead of providing equal justice for the preborn, S 1077 continues to require law enforcement to be involved in providing paperwork in order for certain babies to be murdered. Instead of providing equal justice for the preborn, S 1077 requires that those who would kill them get a government booklet before doing so. What a perversion of informed consent. I can go on about the injustices in this bill. This bill is simply iniquitous and oppressive. The word of God says, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees and the writers who keep writing oppression." I strongly urge you to oppose S 1077, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you for being here. Don't see any questions. Martha Lund? Pardon?
I already testified.
Okay. Joy Filon. Sorry. Set me straight.
My last name is Falonchek. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Joy Falonchek, and I'm here representing myself. I am from District 13. I am a Christian and abortion abolitionist. I am testifying against Senate Bill number 1077. I am strongly compelled to obey the command to open your mouth for the speechless, for those appointed to die, to open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. That is Proverbs 31, verses 8 through 9. This bill in it has wicked injustice. It retains legal immunity for mothers to murder their own preborn babies in certain circumstances. What should be your highest concern is what God hates, and this is it. Someone who murders a 3-month-old, irrespective of how he or she was conceived, would be charged with murder, leading to either imprisonment for life or the death penalty. However, this bill retains the injustice that one who murders their preborn child in circumstances defined as criminal abortion, they'll only be sent to prison for 2 to 5 years. It is clear there is partiality in this. The preborn humans are not being treated the same as born humans. The intrinsic value that human beings have is not something that they can possibly grow into or something they can possess merely depending on the circumstances by which they were conceived. Their worth comes from the simple fact that they were made in the image of God. Attempting to merely limit the amount of baby murders by funding pregnancy crisis centers instead of establishing equal protection and equal justice in the law for the preborn is very wrong. It can never be a substitute for justice. May I ask you the very thing asked in Psalm 82, verse 2, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? I urge you with such solemnity to defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and needy, free them from the hand of the wicked, as verses 3 and 4 say. I pray the Lord may impress upon you to reject Bill number 1077. Thank you for your time. I will stand for your questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Maggie
you.
Goff? Welcome.
Hi. My name is Maggie Goff, and I live in Nampa, Idaho, District 13. I'm here representing myself, and I'm also an ambassador for Christ. In my opinion, there is only one truly pro-life bill in the Capitol this year, and that is S-1059, which I believe is sitting in your drawer.
Ma'am, we're speaking about
Yes.
Senate Bill 1077, so let's limit our comments to that.
That being said, I'm opposed to S-1077. It is an abomination. Baked into this bill is the common pro-choice talking points. Each of you have been delegated temporary authority by God. That authority gives you not the right to grant permission to other humans to murder other humans. The government is not to be taking money from citizens and then attempting to give it to or to be more benevolent and more giving than God. Charity is the call of Christians, and Christians receiving money from the government will be under pressure to compromise. This causes divided allegiances, and I'm against this bill. And then that's the end of my presentation. But I also wanted to point out, again, informed consent gives the mother 24 hours to premeditate her murder. A woman, if she is in a medical emergency, goes to the emergency room, in which case the doctors are supposed to try to save both the mother and the baby. Should the baby perish, that is not murder, that is an accidental death, and that is also not an abortion. I am for pregnancy centers, but I do not want it being called health care when somebody murders a baby. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Lawson? Okay, did I miss anyone else? Senator Adams, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, you know, it's really great when you have a lot of testimony on a bill that you've worked on, because it gets all the jitters out of you as you're sitting there listening to everybody else talk. And it actually helps you maybe understand why opposition is there in the first place. So I just want to touch on a few things that I heard, and hopefully they'll bring some clarity to those concerns. The first one I want to bring up is special treatment in this grant. This isn't special treatment. This is consistent with other grants offered by Department of Health and Welfare. This is the same structure. So there's no special treatment there. As far as private religious entities receiving public funds, I think that debate has been fully settled by this legislature. And even if you didn't support legislation that we passed, this session, the launch program can be used for private, and it's a grant program. Pell Grants, which is a federal grant, can be used for private religious institutions. So again, these are examples of how we already do this, and it is clearly legal. Let's see, I wrote down a lot of notes, so I'll try and just make sure I touch all on that. Was a lot more testimony than I expected, so thank you all. I want to touch a little bit on the nonprofits. So we have a robust demographic of nonprofits in this state, and there are grants available to them by the state already for a host of things. And I'll use the example of the Department of Commerce, who offers grants for expanding tourism in your area. Now, maybe you support that, maybe you don't. But in comparison, I would say this is infinitely more important to the intent of the state to promote life. Let's see. This legislation, someone said it did not have oversight. This legislation and this grant would not just have oversight from the Department of Health and Welfare, but from the director specifically. So there is oversight on this grant. They don't have to take it. Any nonprofit crisis pregnancy center that is religiously or philosophically opposed to taking grant funds does not have to take it. That's why it's a grant. This will come out of the general fund, yes. But this money is going to be appropriated somewhere. I promise you that. And appropriating $1 million, it's $1 million, actually, and I'm going to get to that. But money to the pro-life institutions who don't have to be religious, by the way. They just happen to be because we live in Idaho. I want to talk real quick about the informed consent materials that it does not amend, but it just clarifies what we already require. And I want to tell the committee and the audience watching what those informed consent materials are. It's 3 booklets that used to be printed by the Department of Health and Welfare, and when new legislation came in, the Defense of Life Act, that took over the space and made the printing of those materials moot. And this reinstates the printing of those materials as is noted in the fiscal note. It's 3 booklets. That person does not have to read them. The first one is on fetal development. It shows the process that they're going through. If they're 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, it shows them that they can see it's a baby, because the state of Idaho has acknowledged that it is a baby. The second booklet is what you should know about abortion, like Supreme Court rulings that say that the state has a vested interest in preserving life, like saying that abortion is not like taking an aspirin. And even in the case of rape or incest, where they've gone through traumatic experiences, abortion is also a traumatic experience. And third is resources available to that expectant mother if they choose life, which we have an obligation to do, to promote life. And that is printed by the Department of Health and Welfare and has been before. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about that fiscal note. So this grant appropriation is $1 million, and there's $15,000 for photo licensing that's required for these booklets to be printed. And then every 5 years, it'll be $10,000 for, I guess, so the licensing is the $10,000 every 5 years, and the printing of those materials is $15,000 every year. So we're talking about $1.025 million in fiscal year 1. Now, to put that in comparison, Planned Parenthood, who testified today, received $700 million of taxpayer funds from the federal government last year to promote who knows what. I want to promote life. And our country has a history of promoting death with taxpayer funds. Promoting free access to abortion.
Raised in the Soviet Union.
And this is the counter to that. We're at a unique time in history, and we know that. We have to meet the moment. I believe this legislation plays a significant part in meeting that moment. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
I do have a clarification request. I thought in your open you indicated that no one asked, there was not an ask on this. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, I was not approached by anyone to run this legislation.
The other question, the $1 million, let's say that only half of that gets used in the next year. Does that fund grow to 1.5 million, or is it just brought up to $1 million?
No, Mr. Chairman, that $1 million will be used. So,
well, and with all due respect, Senator, the question is if it is not used.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And it would be cumulative, it would keep adding. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, and I hope I'm not shooting anybody in the foot here. My understanding of this is that the appropriation is $1 million. If there are 10 crisis pregnancy centers that apply for this, the amount of funds that they will receive will be based on how many clients they served in the previous year. Split that up to $1 million. So at the end of the year, the $1 million will be utilized.
Okay. Don't see any other questions. Senators, Senate Bill 1077 is before us. Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. Chairman, and the senator can answer this question. Your question just sparked another question in my mind about this. So Senator Adams, I'll let you get to your seat and then I'll ask the question. Mr. Chairman, Senator Adams, so I see that there was, for those who are not operating over a year, there was a limit of $25,000. Based on how this is written, could the department, depending on the application, just choose a different type of amount or a different amount for the centers that applied? So in other words, I think I understood your response back to the chairman that however many apply, it would be equally divided. Does the department have discretion in how much they would apply to any one applicant based on how this is drafted?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Den Hartog, so I want to make sure I understand your question. So I'm just going to speak back, and if I don't answer it, please ask a follow-up so I can clarify. I want to make sure we all understand this. So you spoke about the minimum award. That is for a crisis pregnancy center that does not have the 1 year previous information on how many clients they've served. So that would be the cap for them. And it is articulated that the amount of and this is on line 14, section 2, the amount of individual grant awards shall be determined by the department based on an amount proportionate to the number of clients served by the applicant in the previous calendar year.
Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That helps. So a follow-up then in where the chairman was headed. So the department could pick a discretionary amount for the grant award based on how many clients any individual crisis pregnancy center serves.
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, I believe so. I believe that is correct.
Other questions? Senate Bill 1077 is before the committee. Sharantan.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send Senate Bill 1077 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Den Hartog, that Senate Bill 1077 be sent to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Discussion on the motion. Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be a no on this, and I hope I make it clear why. Many who have testified regarding the first portion of this bill, I agree with. When I became a deacon at our church, probably 5 or 6 years ago, one of the major topics we talked about was that government has largely replaced the church in efforts of benevolence and various functions. This is another step in that wrong direction. Crisis pregnancy centers should be supported by donations and not taxpayer dollars. Taxpayer dollars are taken by force. Let us be generous with our own money and not force us to maybe give twice. So that's I guess a major problem that I have with this. It is an improper role of government. Every dollar spent is a dollar taxed. So this is a major problem I have with it. It does have the problem of bringing future strings attached, as others have noted. These centers should remain, if they're Christian, they should remain Christian. And they should be a faith-based entity supported by donations. Some of the concerns that I have as well is if we go down this road, if a pregnancy center is able to tap into public funds, grant funds, it will discourage donations. If I know that I'm already funding this through my tax dollars, it's going to be harder for me to be motivated to donate to something. If there is a pregnancy center that is struggling with donations, it might be because no one really believes in their mission or the work they're doing. This would prop up something that maybe isn't providing the service that the community wants. I think there are a lot of problems that could be created with this. Beyond that, the amendment that it seeks to make down on the page 3, I have problems with for a couple of reasons. It doesn't take a principled approach to the issue of life, but it seeks to take a pragmatic approach. And a couple of reasons why I would say it's not in order is, number one, it's not solving a problem because there are no babies being killed under this exception, as far as we know here in Idaho. And what it does, as was mentioned by some testifiers, is that it forces there to be what's called informed consent, but it's a better knowledge of what you're doing to your own child. This is a human being, we believe it is, and we believe it should not be killed. But what it does is it says, once she has a better knowledge of what she's actually doing, then that's no longer considered criminal abortion. And it goes exactly backwards of what we should be saying in our laws. We should be affirming the equal value and dignity and worth of all human beings. And this would say that once she has a good understanding of what she's doing for 24 hours prior, then it's no longer criminal abortion. And I believe what it does is it calls evil good and good evil. So those are two of the major problems I have with this, I will be voting no on this, and I would urge you to vote no as well.
And Senator Anthony, I apologize, I should have let you speak to your motion, but
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman, and I appreciate that courtesy, and I appreciate that. Just to speak the motion and just some general comments, this is one of those pieces of legislation that really is complicated, and it presents the complicated nature of these issues. And I think Senator Shippey's comments also demonstrate how that is complicated. Because what I know about Senator Shippey is he is very pro-life. And what Senator Shippey, I think, would say about me is that I'm very pro-life. But we address those things in different ways. And I know that the sponsor of this legislation is very pro-life. And so we approach these things differently. I wanted to say thank you to all those who testified, and I mean all of those of you who testified, because I think that we all, in our own way, care very deeply about these issues. And I say that sincerely to those who sincerely disagree with me. I know you do care. I really know that. I appreciate those who came and talked about their abolitionist stance. I know you care deeply about it. I know you do. I say all that because I think that these hearings are important for the reason that the dialogue is created. And I think that one of the things, as we've discussed these issues this year in this committee, and as we've talked about pieces of legislation that are not even presented today, are that the way we're going to continue to navigate through the issues is to have the dialogue. I don't know. I appreciate you, Chairman. Let me just say a few things generally.
Senator Hartog?
May I continue, Chairman? I'm getting in the weeds. I appreciate it, but I just think some of that has to be said, because I don't want people to think that we're not listening, because I do listen to everybody who comes in very carefully, even when I disagree with them.
About it.
I really do.
It doesn't change your mind now, does it, sir?
But I don't necessarily agree with you, and that's okay.
Yeah, you don't agree with anything that the testifiers say.
This piece of legislation, I think, is tough, and it may have a tough time on the floor. But I do know its intent, and I have also been very keen to understand the criticism of the position of the pro-life members of the legislature who have sought over the years to restrict abortion access in the state. And one of the criticisms is that you restrict abortion access in the state, but you don't provide resources. You don't provide resources to women who find themselves, and men for that matter, who find themselves in difficult situations. And it's not compassionate. And it's not real. And so I think what the senator who has brought this legislation is trying to do is address some of those concerns. And I understand that. And so I see the intent of the legislation. I think it's a difficult piece of legislation, and it may have a difficult path. But understanding all of that background, understanding that the state of Idaho has taken the position over the years to limit abortion, understanding that the criticism of not providing resources has been there, understanding very frankly, and I've heard testimony about this today, that in fact, and it is fact, we as a nation have poured billions of dollars of taxpayer money into a pro-abortion lobby and a pro-abortion industry. I mean, to say that we shouldn't use taxpayer money for these kinds of issues is, I might agree with it.
Why don't you just say,
Mr.
Anton, that you don't believe in women's reproductive rights? That's exactly what you're saying.
A drop in the bucket.
Idaho has lost 20%.
So all those things are persuading me to say, let's take this to the floor. Let's continue the dialogue. And I think it may have a difficult path going forward, but I think it's worth the dialogue. And for that reason, I've made the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to wait till your light's out, and it is. Senator Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually, some of the comments the pro tem made were similar to what I was considering making. We have taken a position in the state of Idaho to protect life and to promote life, particularly for our preborn children. And I think we are in a new era, and with our Defense of Life Act being the current status that we sit in the state of Idaho, I agree that it's important to provide resources to these women who are in difficult circumstances. And for that reason, I think it's important to support this piece of legislation. I do want to clarify, and this happens from time to time when we have a piece of legislation, just in our drafting, the way it works, we get different code sections that get brought into a piece, to a bill for our consideration. That doesn't mean we're changing that particular section or changing the existing status of our laws. And I think sometimes that gets mixed up in what we're actually being considered to vote on in committee today. And I just wanted to put that on the record. We aren't changing any of that. We're making things consistent with the state of Idaho. And then one other thing, Mr. Chairman, and this is just a personal note, as the only woman on this committee, I frankly take offense to the term pregnant people. I think it is offensive to women in the state of Idaho. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ruckte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some brief remarks. So I did want to address comments made about Planned Parenthood, because I just think it's important that we correct inaccuracies right away, just so we don't create a narrative that's not accurate. But I don't think any sort of grants Planned Parenthood receives come anywhere near $1 million. And Planned Parenthood, of course, doesn't provide abortion services in Idaho, but they do provide family planning, vasectomies, birth control, cancer screenings, lots of different services for women and men. And then I wanted to mention, I don't know a lot about these these crisis pregnancy centers. I've been to one. And I went to that one because I knew Joyce, and I think very highly of Joyce. She's just one of the best humans I know. And so I just wanted to go see what it was she did. I will just tell you, my experience there was not what I've heard described. That's not to say there aren't crisis pregnancy centers who shouldn't be subject to criticism. I'm just saying that was my experience. But nevertheless, my main issues with this bill is, again, we're talking about spending $1 million that lacks oversight. It's taxpayer money. We have to know where taxpayer money is being spent. We have to have oversight. And I'm not, Article 9, Section 5, I'm not going to pretend my reading of Article 9, Section 5, which talks about prohibition on sectarian appropriations, is much better or any better than the next person. But to me, it seems pretty clear this would be a violation of the Idaho Constitution on that area. But it's complicated, or can be. And despite the explanations of why it might be allowed under Article 9, Section 5 of the Idaho Constitution, I think there are, I think the constitutional arguments are there to say this would be prohibited. It's a clear violation. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Senator Burnt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Senator Adams' presentation this morning. Appreciate all of the testimony. This is a delicate issue. I'm certainly one to respect all, especially women who are giving their testimony this morning. I don't think there's anyone in this room, including my dearest friends, that think that I'm not pro-life. I'm very much pro-life. And this is the struggle with this bill for me to a certain degree, because I don't like the fiscal note that's attached to it. I don't like parts of the bill, specifically the fiscal note, that makes it hard. the life portion of the bill, I'm completely in favor for. If I do, I'm still not decided yet, Mr. Chair, but if I vote yes on this, I will do it in a way that leaves me some latitude on the floor to change my vote.
That's
Just some comments I would
baloney.
offer, and I reflect
That's
on Senator
baloney.
Shippey's thoughts on once government inserts itself into propping up something or supporting something, you can actually have a negative effect on the donations that were coming in to that same end. And when I further consider that there was no request from crisis pregnancy centers for this money, that leads me to question, one, why are we considering this, spending the taxpayer dollars that will be ongoing? And it seems like the answer to my question was on how the funding would be distributed would be, it would absolutely spend the full $1 million every year. And that would mean to me that you could be spending money where it maybe wasn't justified or appropriate, or the application lacked sufficient substance to qualify for a grant. So I'm going to be a no. I find it kind
Good
of
on you.
amusing isn't the right word, but anytime we have a bill that has connotations of pro-life or pro-choice, we have to qualify ourselves where we fit in that. And so I guess I will too. I'm pro-life, but it seems like when you vote one way or another on these bills, you're characterized as something contrary to what you are. And I don't think we should have to continually qualify what we are, but it seems that's the environment we're in. But I think there's an industry out there that's doing some things to promote some information to folks that may need it. They seem to be doing that. They don't seem to be asking for the money. And so I'm going to be opposed. It looks like Senator Shippey has some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an additional comment. These pregnancy centers, I don't think are asking for it. It seems to be a few that maybe would like to take it. But I will point out that once money is available, it is a temptation to take it. And a major concern as well is a lot of, at least a number of these centers would be a very gospel-centered organization. And I do think that once you commit to taking government funds, it has at least the long-term effects of losing the purity of the gospel. And these are concerns that I think should be considered. Our church is seeking to build a building. Should we take taxpayer funds, money that has been compelled by the taxpayer to build a building for our church, and that would have all kinds of problems. These should be funded by voluntary donations. Most of it, I'm assuming at this point, are from Christians or someone of like faith or understanding. So I just think this creates a lot of long-term problems, and I don't think this is a good solution I think this is trying to fix something that isn't broke, I guess. And I think it was a quote I have here is, if it ain't broke, don't break it. So thank you.
Again, we have a motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Den Hartog, that Senate Bill 1077 be sent to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Catherine, would you call the roll?
Senator Ruckty.
Nay.
Senator Shippey.
Nay.
Senator Adams.
Aye.
Senator Den Hartog.
Aye.
Senator Taves.
Aye.
Senator Harris.
No.
Senator Anthon.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Burnt.
Vice Chairman Burnt.
No.
Chairman Guthrie.
No. That motion has
Failed.
failed on a 4-5 vote. Committee, is there anything